I'd like to show you guys what I've been working on the past few weeks. What I've been doing is working specifically in Payload, working a lot on Forms, so the Forms Builder plugin, and seeing how far I can take that now with this new Tanstack Form v1 that's been released. So let's take a look at what's this final thing gonna actually look like. So on the Payload's website template, we can just go to the contact form, and I've updated the contact form to use this that has all the fields so that I can test them all out. And it has form validation on all of them. We even have some custom validations specifically from the admin panel. Let me just fill this out so that we can see what a submission looks like. I even have arrays. You can delete an array. This is a little red flag, right? But I will explain that towards the end when I get to that point. It's just a little small bug that I found when using animate presence with motion.dev, specifically with the array on Tanstack Form. And accept it, and register, and contact form submission saved. So if we check this out, we have a form submission, and you can see that it came from the contact form, and we have our custom form component. And you can also see that we got an email in our mail pit, and that came because in our contact form we told it to send an email to email. I closed that, right? That's where it came from. And to send all the data with a little intro. And if we go to our email, we have our little intro got sent to that email that was in the form, and all our data. And it even breaks down the arrays and our groups, which are objects. So everything works as it should. How the form builder plugin was designed. So you're probably wondering, why would I use Tanstack Form when React Hook Form works really well? So if you take a look at our original form, the component, we're going to have some types for the form block type. We have our props. We have form methods, which have a register, handle, submit, form state, and a control. There's some very specific React Hook form things. Our form provider, we have to pass each field, the form methods, control, the errors, the register. And then in, say, the text field, the most common one, we have this prop with the errors, which we got to pass in these generics. Use form register, you got to pass in then a generic for the field values. And it is kind of confusing how those types work. So it would be nice if the library had all the types built in. And so if you look over at the quick start for Tanstack Form, you can see that we have some hooks to set up the context. But then when we create the form, we have default values, we have validators, we have our on submit. We're not typing anything. We set up our form. We have this app field, which creates a context for the input. We pass the child's field into this text field component, and every type is inferred. So when we type in username, that is type safe because it has it set up here in the default values in the validators. So it's a lot cleaner. And being that it's Tanstack, it has extra features using um, see, let me pull up my form block. It has extra features like using the store. It has a store built in, and so it uses Tanstack Store under the hood, so we can store all our states, the field states, the form states. We have state as, is submit successful, but we have so much there. Can submit, error maps, is the form valid, is it touched, just everything is already tracked. And so we can easily pull up that state that's already built into it. The only state that I'm actually tracking is the post error on the on submit function. Everything else is already tracked and built into Tanstack Form. So there's some extra features and cleaner to work with, and even more type safe. All right, so let's look at the plugin config. So in the website template, we have plugins, and then it has this index where we put all our plugins, and then we feed that into the main payload config. And so since we got a lot going on there, I busted it out to its own file. So I got custom form builder plugin. So that's in this little directory. First thing you will notice is I messing with all the fields. So what I wanted to do is add fields, and I also wanted to modify existing fields. So to be able to do that, what I did is I pasted in all the fields, the block fields from the payload repo. So I have my select block, I have my text block, and I have all of them. I even added my phone block, I added an array block, and I added a group block. And then I exported those all out as fields. I even gave myself a type in case I needed the type. And so for the array, instead of saying true or false, I'm doing fields.array to grab my actual block. Where you can grab that kind of stuff is in the payload repo on GitHub. Payload packages, plugin form builder, source, plugin forms, and then they find you got your fields. And so all those I just copied and pasted over. Next, the form overrides is just what's in the website template. That was Paul's example to show you that you can modify the lexical editor for your rich text in that plugin by finding it and modifying it just for the confirmation message. That was just an example. We're not doing anything there. For the form submissions, I didn't like the ID, so I just changed as the title, so I just changed that to the created at. And then most of the work is in this fields. So I grab the default fields. The first thing is I want the form field. Now that's the relationship field, so it knows what form it's coming from. And the submission data. So that gets all the processing for sending emails and how it was displaying it. I'm not going to display it using submission data. I'm going to use different stuff, but I need it for the emails. So then I return all my fields that are going to be used in the form submission collection. So we have the form field, and then I added the form type because in the before email hook it is going to be difficult to get the title of the form field by the relationship field, so I just throw it in a hidden field. Maybe I should have did a virtual field, I'm not sure. And then I have my submission data. Now I overrode it so that it would be hidden because I'm not actually going to use that to view it. I'm only using that for the emails that are built in. And so I have JSON data, type JSON, And you don't even really need to put this custom component in because it actually looks pretty decent without it. I'll just show you real quick if you haven't yet. Let's go to form submissions, and you can see it is the JSON data is already really easy to read. Though if you have an editor that thinks that is a big wall of code, we can use our custom component. Now that custom component I have in components folder, so I got form data. Custom component, I can type it as JSON field server component. That allows me to get the data. I know the data.json data is what I'm looking for, so that gives me my form data. If there's no form data, just display a placeholder. And then I want to separate my group fields, my array fields, and all the other individual fields. So if the value is an object, not an array, I have group fields. If it is, the value is an array, I know it's my array fields. And if it's not an object or an array field, I know it's my individual fields. So in this card, I'm going to map through my individual fields, grab the key and the values, and then I'm going to throw those in spans. I can view it. I'm going to do the same thing with my group fields. My group values, I'm going to map through those entries and display the key value. And then with the array fields, I'm going to grab those items, I'm going to map through those items, and then map through the entries of each one to do the key value. And that's what gives me this beautiful looking thing. Now from here, let's go to this Tanstack Form folder where we have our Tanstack Form block. But before that, I just want to show you that we were rendering form block from blocks form component, but I just comment that out, and we're going to actually render Tanstack Form block, which is this file right here. And that's the only difference. Now, if you've already watched the first video from the payload team on the walkthrough, then you know what's going on with, this enable intro, is it successful or not for the confirmation message, and some other things. But I really want to go over form composition with Tanstack Form. So let's take a look at the documentation real quick. If we go to form composition, to understand what I'm doing, you'd want to read through this documentation page. I don't know how to make this make sense in 40 seconds, just quickly. Though it goes over how I create this form context, and then I can bound some field components, and I can bound some form components, and that helps with inferring all the types. So as we create so I want to make a text field, right? This is my text field component. If I want to infer the context of the field that's getting sent to this component that I can reuse for any text field, I can wrap it in this form.at field. I pass the value that's expected, and this is type safe. So if I try to put middle name, it will give me a type error because that is not to be expected. And that's how we do our fields. We can also do other components like our submit button. It's going to grab some form context. It can use from that form context, we can subscribe to a certain type of state. That state can be used inside this one component, and it will only re-render that one component, not the whole page. Super cool. And then we can also break these forms into smaller pieces. They call them child forms. Using this with form, higher order component, which is giving me some problems. Because this works great if you know what your default values are. So if you're making static forms, it is 100% type safe, awesome to work with. If I am not using static forms, I'm making dynamic forms, I'm pulling down from a CMS, I need to pass in those, and I can't run a function here to generate. I can't use a use React hooked. So I need to wrap this with form with another component, and that's problematic. It gets messy. So I got a little trick to be able to solve that problem. So that's enough of the docs. Go back to my form. So since it's payload, in this block is going to grab the form block, and in that form block I have my form. Since it can be a string or a form, I got to do this fancy type strict stuff to make sure it's not a string. Then I can destruct my props. The majority of what is happening in this file is happening in this use dynamic form. So I'm going to pass it my form from payload, the state, the one little piece of state that I got to track, and that's going to be used in this other React hook to be able to generate the options. The options are going to give me my default values for the form in my onSubmit. I could have just typed in my onSubmit right here, but I decided to extract it out and put it in the form options. Then I'm going to use those, and I'm going to actually generate the form with this useAppForm. I do this in its own file specifically for when I return the form, I can export the type, that is the return type of the form. So now I can use this type, this crazy inferred type, throughout the rest of my form, since I was going to have problems with that with form higher order component. Now we should talk about all the context. So what's going on with the rest of these? So the rest of these hooks. So we have this form context. This is just some little boilerplate that we got to create this context, and we're going to use some of that here. But this is all the context for all my field components and form components. So I got everything in field components, and I only got the one submit button for the form component. And then back here you saw that we used the use form options. And so that hook that I created is also a very similar thing that's in the docs. I have some types that I'm going to be using. I pass in the form in the state that I'm tracking. I break out the props that I'm going to use from the payload form. I'm going to use router for redirects, and my default values need to be generated. My default values, let me hide my onSubmit real quick because that's a lot. My default values are generated by mapping through each one, and if the field.block type is a number, then I'm gonna, and there is a default value, I set the value cast to a number. Otherwise I use an empty string. The empty string, you would think it would be like 0 since it's a number, but I'll explain that when we get to validation. The checkbox, if there's a default value, set the default value as a boolean, make sure it's not a string, otherwise it defaults to false. My arrays and my groups got to do the weird thing of going back through the gotta be resolved recursively, and everything else should just be string. So that all fits into that. And then it creates this object as it maps through and returns it. And so then I have my default values. And then for the onSubmit, this is almost exactly like in the website template, almost exactly like the video from Payload when they went through their onSubmit. we're tracking the set post error. We're going to reset it once every time there's an on submit. The data to send, we had to do an object.entries type thing but we got to do a little bit more because we have arrays and objects. So normally you would just do this object entries, map through it, field is field name, the value is stringified field value, but we got to flatten it first. And so to flatten all our objects and all our arrays, we find that it is an object and not an array, so that we know we got to do some things to it, and we want property to be a parent key dot child key, and then for the array we want it to be a parent key with an index number in child key, and then we return that flattened object. Then we can run it through the object.entries to turn into a field value object. So that's a whole lot of code just to create an adapter, but it works. Then we have our try catch. I am sending it the form ID for the form. I'm sending the form type. You can see it's just the title. And the submission data from the data to send, what's all prepared. And the JSON data, just the data that it comes from the form. I really love working just with that by itself. And then if there's an error, we set the post request error. If there's a redirect, we redirect. If the form is still showing, there's a form.reset. Super cool that comes from the onSubmit. It gives the values and the form API. I just renamed that form so it looks like it's supposed to here. And the catch. And so that returns all our options. That returns those options using this form options function from Tanstack Form. And that will come back to here so that we can grab our default values and our onSubmit. We can pass that to create the form. And now we're back in our main block. So now we have our form and default values. We're going to grab our is submit successful state from the use store from the form. We're going to do the same stuff that they did in the other videos, showing you how we can display content intro, or if there was an error message, confirmation messages. We have our onSubmit, and our form is just a card with the render fields in the footer with our submit button. Even has our submit button label. Our defaults to submit. Now what's left is to look at this render fields. So let's jump into render fields. What I have, basically we got to send the field, we got to send the default values, the form, and I have this special thing with the parent key for how I'm rendering the objects. Because there's no special field for objects like there is for arrays. So I gotta handle that stuff myself. And so it's just a switch case. If the field.block title is a message, we just send the rich text with the data as the field.message. If it's a text, then we do the Tanstack stuff. We have this form.appField key in the name. And then we also handle all our validation here. We could handle validation in the form options. You could see default values onSubmit, but you can also do validators, and you can put all that validation for everything, but you'd have to generate all that validation like this. And there's already enough going on there. I kind of like it actually right here, so I can see for my text fields, here's my validation. And then it passes all that context to my text field. And that text field is a field component. So if we go in our field components, we have our text field. We pass it the whole field. And I have that typed as text form field. How did we get that type, you wonder? Well, another good reason of being able to edit all our fields, we could go to text field, and I was able to just add an interface name. So now that block is typed. And we can grab the field using use field context from Tanstack Form. We can pass in string, so now it knows that this field is a string. Look at that. We can grab all the errors, field.store, the array of errors, and we can display the errors if there are any. And we can do all this stuff for each field that we have under fields. So next I have email, and I have all the ZOD validation for every component, field I should say. And then the special case is when we get to array fields and group fields. So the array fields, we got to, instead of using the with form, I'm able to pass just the form that's typed. That's nice. I can grab all my field stuff, my default values. It is just going to be a card. For the array, I have the special field context for mode of array. The field.state.value, I gotta verify that it's an array. Then I can map over it. I also have it wrapped in animate presence. So as I can do, so that allows me to do an exit animation so that it has that smooth delete animation. I have that motion wrapper and all that stuff down here. And that's actually what's giving me that weird error, that bug. It's because, where am I at? It's because it loses its, it doesn't realize it's controlled, or it goes from controlled to uncontrolled during that exit animation, and then that's what sends out that error. And I don't think it affects usability at all, but I need to create a bug report for Tanstack Form. So there's going to be some slight changes in my styles based on if it's an array with with 2 or more fields. So each array item should have a button so that I can remove it with this field.remove value using the index from here. Now the array fields, there can be 1, there could be 9. So I got to map through all those array fields. Now the little fancy thing that I got to do is I need to rewrite the name and label for these field values, because this is be able to hold its context properly. It has the name, the index, and then the field.name, the parent name, the index, and then the child name. And I can also make sure that it says like parent 1, parent 2, parent 3 for that label. And then I send that back through render field so it can render all those fields properly inside the array. I also have a button to be able to add another field. So what it does is it adds the default values to a new field so that all the child fields are, let me show you. So when I press this plus button, it adds an array, but it has to add a, like a first name as empty string, last name is empty string, email is empty string, phone number is empty string, so that these fields will render. So that's what the default values thing is all about. And I don't like losing the spacing once this removed and added. If I can add more or can't add more based on the max rows allowed. So I just turned it to opacity 0 or opacity 100. And that's my array field. The other thing that is we'll go back to here so you can see. So that was my array field, and next is my group field component. My group field component is the card, and then it renders the fields. The only difference is that we're going to pass in a parent key, because there's no, like I said, there's no field to be able to tell it that it is a group like there is with array. So in the render fields, if by chance there is a parent key, we're going to set the name to parent key dot field dot name. Otherwise, just return the. And if there is no name, don't even fucking worry about it. So that is only there just for the sake of the group field. Now the next thing is, once this form submission is sent, I would like to be able to send emails. And I'd like to even send really pretty emails. So I'd like to be able to use React emails. To be able to turn on or off using the form's rich text or a select field for React emails right here would be really complicated, because I love using all this. I love all that. But I'd like to, choose whether or not I want rich text or if I want my own custom email specific for this form. That would be great. That would really complicate this plugin. And I think that's where I hit a wall with being able to maintain what this form builder plugin is and what I want it to do. So before I go further with that though, the one last thing that we can do is we can use MailPit to see what these emails actually look like. And that's a simple one. We can just do a Docker compose, and this is straight from the MailPit documentation. And you can have that up and running in Docker. And you're also going to want to do is have a node mailer set up, and it automatically just grab everything before it gets tried to send out. Doesn't even have to have good usernames or passwords. You just got to have the right port. Probably localhost is important, and it'll catch it all. Really easy. And I love being able to see what my email actually looks like. But going back to React emails, something that I was able to do in another project, maybe I can just pull it up real quick. Let me go to I'm redoing D21 softball from Strappy to Payload right now. My third project for my boss where I work for. I just used the before email in the hook in the form builder plugin. Grab the submission data and the form type. The submission data is actually my JSON data here. And I grab all the emails to send. And if the form type is contact, then I know I want to use this one React email component. That React email component It has the little header, and then it lists out all our things in the footer, and just a nice little quick little pretty email based off one of their templates. And then it uses the render function from React Email to turn it into HTML, and then it returns the email. And it does that with all the emails. So I just steal, I just overwrite basically, like whatever was in that message. I just say, I don't care, you're gonna use my React email instead. So that's a quick and dirty way of being able to use React email. Though I think the better approach is, instead of using static these instead of using these static plugins that you can try to guess what they may want to overwrite, and allow these, what are these, allow these overrides the best that we can. There's always going to be something else that somebody's going to want to change, so we're always going to hit a wall. It's the same problem we had with UI components, and the reason why shadcn got so popular is that we could have our own custom components, and he created this registry so that we could own the data. So why haven't we yet created a registry for payload blocks? So I think it doesn't make sense for me to go any further on perfecting the forms with payload without a registry. And so that's where I'm going to be spending the rest of my time moving forward, perfecting this forms with payload. And if you guys have any other ideas, would it be a better approach? I'd love to hear it. I've been thinking about this for a while, but I could use some feedback. Yeah, that's what I got. It's all available in my repo for Payload Tanstack Forms, and you can copy and paste whatever you want in the blocks, Tanstack Form, and then also in the plugins, Form Builder plugin, and also if you want a quick steal the nail pit container, there it is. Thanks.